Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Ateku FM. My name is Monicah Kariuki, your host today, and I'm with
Ben Ateku.
And today in the studio, we are so lucky and privileged to have Lorie Burch. Welcome to Ateku FM. While every U.S. president is elected for a 4-year term, members of the House of Representatives, the lower chamber of Congress, are elected for only 2 years at a time. Thus, every presidential term is punctuated a 2-year mark by midterm election for all 435 seats in the House. However, it isn't only members of the House that Americans will be electing. Voters in many states will also be voting between candidates for seats in U.S. Senate. The term of U.S. Senator is 6 years, which means that every other year, whether it is full presidential election or midterm election, roughly a third of the seats in the Senate are up for grabs.
Welcome, Lorie Burch. If you could introduce yourself to Ateku FM listeners.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you all so much for having me here. This is so exciting. My name is Lorie Burch, and I am currently a candidate running for United States Congress for the 3rd District of Texas, which encompasses pretty much mostly Collin County. There's a little bit of Collin County that's outside the district, but that's pretty much Collin County is the area that I would be representing. And it's primary season right now. We just wrapped up early voting, and election day is March 6th. I know you'll probably mention that as well, to make sure people, whether they're going out and they're in my district or not. I just want to encourage everybody to get out there and vote.
Yes.
Great. Congratulations for taking that bold step to represent the people.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm sure you have watched from the time Obama became president to the time he finished, how great he became.
Yes,
you think
absolutely.
about that before you thought already?
I think I struggle with thinking about those 8 years, because on the one hand, I kind of got into this mode of just expecting things to continue to get better and better, as far as for more people being more inclusive and all of that. And then right now it's a little bittersweet to think about, that time period that we lived in. But he's, that time definitely inspired me. There's always ups and downs, and no person, no presidency, no leader is perfect.
Correct.
But certainly for me and a lot of the folks that I represent, and certainly different communities, it was a lot of progress was made. So we'll see what my journey leads me to, as far as this is the first public step. I mean, as we talked about recently, I've had a lot of experience in working in advocacy and leadership, and I've lived all over the world, and I've went to law school in D.C. I know what that environment is like there, so it is. Never thought I'd necessarily step back into it, but I feel ready and equipped to try and make a difference, so that more people feel like their voices are being heard.
Beautiful. Life is a beautiful journey.
Yes.
It is a beautiful. I love the way that you put that. It is. It's a journey, and you have to be able to be willing to take the next step without knowing where it will lead.
Yeah.
That's what makes it exciting.
Yes. Yes.
All right. If we can just jump into the issues. Recently, we all have watched news. We've watched, mass shootings. And therefore, gun control is going to be something of importance to every voter. And we would like to know, as voters, what is your stance on gun control?
Sure, and certainly this is something that has been very top of mind recently with the most recent school shooting in Florida. And so I've had the opportunity to talk and listen to a lot of people. It was interesting, right after the week that the shooting happened, on my block walks, I ran into a lot of teachers, and they have very interesting opinions on particularly what not to do, which I'll definitely address. But what's interesting about the gun safety issue that we're confronted with is one of the center points of my campaign is that, and one of the reasons I'm running and what I want to do the most, one of the biggest changes I want to affect, is to get this big money, corporate money, out of the pockets of politicians, so that they are more accountable and beholden to the people that they represent. And so the gun control issue is one that certainly is encapsulated with this, because we aren't having conversations.
Right.
We don't have leaders that are willing to bring people together and find common sense solutions because they are beholden to the gun lobby. When you talk to gun owners, and I'm not one, but my brother-in-law is. He's an avid hunter. My stepdad is a retired Vietnam vet, and they've been very helpful to me in understanding, and they're two of the most passionate people about gun safety. But I think one of the biggest things we need to do in politics in general, but certainly when it touches this, is to elect candidates who are not taking money from special interests and political action committees, and as well as campaign finance reform, which I know may not seem like it goes hand in hand, but it certainly does, because we've got to be able to elect people who are going to be more accountable to different perspectives and having these conversations. Another thing that I would like to see, you start with something that's such a hot button issue, is to find where you have that common ground, and there's actually a lot of it. There's a lot of majority support for things. Something as simple as allowing the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, to be able to have funding to research gun violence. It's really hard to find solutions if you don't have the research and the data to understand what you can tackle. Another thing is enforcing the current laws that we already have. There are so many loopholes. One that was really surprising for me to find out is this default proceed loophole. And what this one is, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but if a background check takes more than 3 days, then the default is just to go ahead and give the firearm to the person.
Oh, wow.
And the Charleston shooting would have been prevented by that loophole. Just to give you an example, the one where the young man shot 9, I believe it was 9 church members. And so there's also a boyfriend loophole. So in domestic violence situations, which by the way, when a firearm is involved in domestic violence, homicide increases 500%. 500%. And so it's reported when it's a spouse, but if it's a non-spousal relationship, which in this day and age, there's a lot of couples, they live together, but they aren't married, but that doesn't get reported. And to prevent someone from getting guns in the wrong hands. And that's something that whether you're a gun owner or not a gun owner, people agree. And none of the main initiatives that are being discussed would take a single gun out of the hands of lawful gun owners. There's other things that can be tackled and looked at, but I think that those are some of the most important things to tackle is the big money in politics, allowing the CDC to be able to research what is going on in this country. Because look, mental health and violent video games, I mean, all of these things, they're a part of this, right? But they also are in other countries, and other countries don't have this problem. And I respect the Second Amendment. I think that there's no conflict here. But I think that when you have leaders that are trying to push their own agenda, their own corporate agenda by the donors that are funding them, they don't want you to see the common ground. They want to create this divide where they make it a black and white issue, whether you're either for the Second Amendment or you're not. And that's not the case. There's plenty of people, and that's what we really need, is to have leaders that will help foster those conversations, find that common ground, and finally get some common sense, gun sense reform passed.
Lorie, let me just ask a follow-up question. Every time I think about gun control and how much I think of America being such a great country, I think of America being a country that is able to tackle issues. And I want to give examples. We had Ebola a few years back. Just because some people were infected while at work, guess what? They had to put protocols, which means what I'm trying to say is that America has protocol of almost everything and has an exit strategy of almost everything, right? Okay, so for example, if there's a pothole somewhere, and then people keep calling the city, hey, my car broke down because I hit this pothole. Guess what? The city is going to repair that pothole because of all these phone calls, right? That is simple. Now, when I think about guns, a 17-year-old cannot buy alcohol, a 19-year-old cannot buy alcohol, but yet we allow 19-year-olds to go buy firearms how much or how many people can a 19-year-old kill by driving a vehicle while drunk versus a 19-year-old being able to buy these firearms and they can go into a mass shooting? One life is way too many.
Yes.
So why is it that America has not taken a stance on this and think that NRA is not bigger than that one life that has been lost? In this case, thousands of lives that have been lost.
Right. No, it's an outrage, and one of the things that's been so really inspiring to me is seeing the students from Florida that they're just not going to take this anymore.
Right.
And it feels different, even though we hear a lot of people mobilize, and one example of an organization that is doing great work is Moms Demand Action. But this feels different, and I think it's because it's also combined with this political climate where people are sick and tired of the divisiveness of elected leaders not leading and not listening. And there is a corporate hold on them from getting anything done. And when you touch something as sensitive as gun, and we talk about mass shootings, but it's not even mass shootings. I gave you the example of domestic violence and all of that, and why we can't. I was talking actually to my stepdad last night about, I'm just asking him ideas as a gun owner, but as a gun safety advocate, as far as what about putting stricter laws on if your guns get stolen, reporting them. Everything leading to trying to prevent them from getting in the wrong hands. Or what about liability that is put on the gun owner who allows their guns to get into the wrong hands? I mean, there's things that we can do that don't touch the Second Amendment right. But with any, to your point, when you're talking about any sort of right or freedom, we are the land of the free, home of the brave, and America is an amazing country. That has to be balanced with your right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I mean, that is in our founding document that's what we're about. And so no right is necessarily greater than any other right. But I really feel at the heart of this matter, and why I decided to take on this crazy journey of running for elected office, which I never thought I would do, is I've spent a lifetime, it feels, of being a leader and an advocate, trying to get the other elected leaders to listen to us, to all of us. And I've gotten sick of them not listening to us. So I think this is a time in this country to replace them with us. And what I mean by that is everyday people from all walks of life that know, that are willing to listen, that are not, and willing to talk to each other, and that are not beholden to this corporate hold, which corporations are not bad. Actually, what's been interesting with the gun control issue is that corporations now have been on the forefront of actually either deciding not to give discounts to NRA members, or you've seen Dick's Sporting's good in the news recently that they're not going to sell assault rifles. I mean, it's amazing, but there has to be the political will, and it gets down to something that we were talking about real in the beginning, and that is people have got to go vote.
Yes.
You've got to vote, because the idea of leaders who are out of touch and listening to these special interests and people not voting, that goes hand in hand. And we've got to hold leaders accountable, and one of the best ways we do that is getting to the polls. But voter turnout is so low in Texas, and sometimes the lowest. People are not showing up. And you know, I don't necessarily want to, take this off into a voting rights discussion, but we definitely can, because I just want to say that I don't mean that in a flippant way, like, hey, you just got to go vote. But because what you need to understand is that's all fine and good, but not everybody understands what that means to vote, or who to vote for, or how to vote, or even the mechanics of where to go. And so I feel like we could be doing a lot more to make voting not as intimidating to people. Because I think when you talk to most people, they understand that voting is important, but they don't know where to go. They don't know how to find out, who are these names on the ballot? What are these initiatives? What is it even like when I get there? What if they ask me for a form of identification that I don't have? What do you do with the machines? I mean, we have to be realistic. And I've always felt in leadership, you have to meet people where they are and be able to educate them so that they can turn out and vote. So I just totally took this gun control question and turned it voting, but to me it is. It's about the people having a voice.
Okay, and that makes sense. What I found interesting is the lack of a common ground that you just mentioned, because since the shooting, I have listened to both sides speak, and it's been interesting that while I would think this is a situation that demands empathy, the gun control advocates, and particularly NRA leaders, have spoken against the students in a situation that lacks empathy. They simply see them as being used by, advocates of gun control, without any mention of empathy. And I don't know whether it is misreporting. I found that interesting. In Atlanta, after Delta decided to go against it, the voices that come out, they're saying, we will punish you for this move. And I'm just wondering if those are our leaders. The students are taking control with some sense of sanity on this issue, while the leaders and the grown-ups seem to be losing it. I think that's sad.
Yes.
That the children are taking the lead while we watch.
Yeah.
But it's just.
I think a lot about a gospel song, "Peace in the Valley," which the only reason I know a lot of gospel music is I'm a huge Elvis fan.
Me too.
But I think about how, "Peace in the Valley," one of the lines is that the beast from the wild will be led by a child.
Oh.
And I've thought
so
a lot about that
Oh.
when you see these brave souls who I cannot even fathom what they witnessed. And I'll tell you, I get emotional about it because I don't want my precious 13 and 7-year-old daughters to witness what they have witnessed.
It's true.
Because if you really care about mental health and you want to make this a mental health issue, then think about the mental health of what they're experiencing.
Correct.
And it's one thing for those who have lost their lives, but then there are the survivors, the ones who have either been injured or witnessed these horrific things that in this great country, we have to be able to say, this is not acceptable. This is not acceptable. We do not have to sit by, but it is. The beast from the wild is being led by a child, and those young, brave students are forcing us to have these conversations. And I think when, some of those in power are not necessarily wanting to have those conversations because they have their own personal interests. I think the common ground is found in the people themselves. When we're having, and so leaders, I think, should be fostering these conversations. I don't think when you've got the special interests in them in the room that they're. I'm not saying they shouldn't have a voice. They absolutely should, but they should not be the only voice. And right now, politics is so divisive. It's meant to be black and white because that pits us against each other, so that the status quo and the establishment can keep going as it's been going.
Okay. Well.
So I think this is an awakening.
Okay. Great. Now, mental health issues of teen depression and suicide has become an epidemic. Today, we hear about this from all over the country. What steps will you take to address these situations? To save these young lives.
So that's something that touches me very personally because we moved to Plano. We had moved from Indonesia, and so I lived in a third world country and went to an international school with kids from all over the world, and it was an amazing experience. And we moved to Plano. Well, that's my home, and I love Plano now. I had a very difficult transition. I was teased a lot. I didn't really understand why. One of it was, that I was told that girls in Texas don't wear their hair short like I did. It's like, well, I just moved from Indonesia where the humidity and the heat is like 100%.
Oh,
and
wow.
and I would be going around with a big fro with my naturally curly hair if I had long hair. So I liked it. That's how a lot of girls wore their hair in school.
Yeah.
And so, but I did. I got I got harassed. I had to change classes. I had to stop taking the bus, and my mom, my brother, and my dad would take me. And I did think about taking my life in a very serious way. I remember that year was this book called Final Exit that had come out about how you could, assisted suicide, basically. And I remember writing that book down in the margin. And luckily, and I think this gets to part of what you're talking about, I'm an old lady, so there was no social media or the internet at that time for me to research that stuff privately, because I might have. And it's hard for me to talk about, but I think about, and it kind of gets back to the first issue, but where we talk about, the same people who are saying that, we need to tackle mental health, that the gun control issue is about mental health, are the same people who are saying that younger generations are entitled and they're snowflakes and they're too sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that gets to answer your question specifically, is part of it is we need to destigmatize mental health and depression and foster a culture of inclusion and acceptance. Even in my own county, we're seeing just recently, earlier this year, in McKinney ISD, teachers who were tweeting out anti-Islamic tweets, anti-trans tweets, which particularly, I'm very active and a part of the LGBT community. Suicide rates are off the charts for LGBT kids. And so if you've got teachers, which, that's balanced, again, we're talking about balancing rights. They have a First Amendment right to be able to tweet all the horrific stuff they want to do. But do those really need to be teachers? Or is there an opportunity to have conversations with them so that they're encountering this youth so they don't feel like they can't go to possibly the only people in their lives that may be willing to help them? I also think that it gets to the healthcare issue. That's such a huge topic right now, with healthcare being more affordable, more accessible. I remember I've gone to counseling in my life, and my dad, who worked for Mobil Oil, had really great health insurance, but I was seeing a counselor, and after the 10th visit, she said, okay, we're done. We can't, the health insurance doesn't allow you to see me anymore, so you'd have to go somewhere else. And I mean, I was not, as a teenager, I was not taken care of or cured in 10 visits. So I just think that there's a lot that we can do as far as a congresswoman, looking to make sure that health care and health reform does truly address a lot of mental health in that, because it's something that plagues us. But also, I think having conversations to help foster people to be open and honest and being able to be accepting, and in these environments we're dealing right now with. In Plano City Council, as councilman who posted this thing about banning Muslims and or Sharia law or whatever it is. And again, how does that make those students feel when they're going to school? How does it make your parents? How does that make you feel? I mean, I know it's one of the hardest things when I came into being a parent to drop them off at school and just wanting them to feel safe, to feel valued, and to have a good education and have a good day. And I think that our leaders certainly could be doing a lot more, both from a legislative standpoint, but also just from an advocacy standpoint, to being more sensitive and open and destigmatizing mental health. It is real, and while you can't see it because it's not a bandage or a handicap or anything like that, it is something that pretty much everybody at some point has dealt with at different degrees of severity.
Wow. Okay. It's interesting what you said about feeling. Perhaps if there was a way for you to research about being suicidal, you could have given it a thought. It's just worth mentioning that I think the last administration had more empathy towards people of all types, but the current administration is sort of unfriendly to certain sectors of the American community. So I just don't know that we're going forwards or backwards, but perhaps, given your openness to all types of people vying for office, maybe that's what we are needing, open-mindedness. But this is Echo. You're listening to Echo FM from our Dallas studio, hosted by Monicah and Ben. And we will take a short break this time, and we'll be right back.
Okay, let me turn off.
Can you turn up that's
No,
okay.
no.
Just turn up the music so that the viewers can hear the music too.
It's not gonna be able to come over.
You want?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but you'll be here. Yeah.
So they'll just see us chatting.
Okay.
Are there any questions? You can look for us and see if there's any questions for Lorie.
Okay, that's interesting. I think there are lots of issues that go on within us that our elected leaders have no idea, so they don't address them. and it's not a priority. And I think if our elected leaders were to get to inside the community at the county level, perhaps they would know what really is us in the community. Because sometimes it's just perceived that,
Well,
people worry about
you
this.
bring up empathy a lot, and I think that's something that it's so lacking. It's so lacking, and even the way, if you look at social media, and I'm not saying social media is good or bad, it's just another platform for human nature to come out.
Oh, yeah.
But the way that the algorithms and everything work is that then it feeds you your own belief system. So if I'm someone who is more left-leaning, then it's going to pick up on that, and so then it's going to feed me all this trash that's going to be anti-right. And so then all it does is feed that into this division, and that is a way of control of us, to prevent us from seeing the other. Like one of the things I cannot understand any sort of backlash to the Black Lives Matter movement, because who are you to tell somebody else what their experience is, or what their identity is? And maybe it's uncomfortable, but politics and democracy is uncomfortable, right? But that doesn't mean it's wrong, and it doesn't mean that and maybe you don't like the way they're saying something or the way they're doing, but that doesn't matter. Let's try and find out tell me what your experience is, so that I can understand. Because if I want my dignity and my identity and my life and my family to be respected, I feel like I should demand that for other people, people I don't identify with. And I think that there's such a richness to our lives when we experience that. But then if you don't connect with people on an empathetic level, which I don't understand why you have to explain compassion to people.
It's so interesting.
But it's better for our economy. It's better for our work environment. It's better for our educational system. It's better for our mental health. So, I mean, if you want to look at dollars and cents, it helps there too.
Sometimes people are compassionate. They have empathy only if it hits home. When they're closer to the fire. You know what I'm saying? Because, I mean, honestly, who in their right mind honestly does not want to lose their right to own a gun, a rifle, because somebody else lost a child? I mean,
well, you see in a lot of these mass shooting instances, particularly the one in Vegas, where, because it was a country music festival, so typically more, right-leaning, right? And that a number of them came out and said their minds are changed. They want to see common sense gun control in action.
But you see, why
because
did
they were close to it, they experienced it.
Exactly, until you experience it. But then, when we have an accident, because it was a guardrail, we are so fast to put the guardrail there.
Right.
But then this is NRA, and we can't defeat NRA? Seriously? Is NRA really bigger than the thousands of lives that have been lost?
Are you ready?
Yeah, we're ready. Yeah.
I'll see you in a
Sorry.
second.
We got some passionate people here, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can go for it now.
Okay.
Okay. All right, welcome back. You're listening to State of the Nation on Echo FM, Dallas Studio, and I'm Monica.
It's Ben.
And today we are talking to Lorie Burch, who is running for United States of America Congress seat for Collin County in Texas. We are going into policy issues. There's a lot of countries receiving United States foreign and military aid in Africa, but their human rights record is awful. What will you as a congresswoman do to hold these African governments receiving U.S. aid into account?
Yeah, it's also a really great question. And so before I give you some of my thoughts on that, I think that the issue at hand that you're asking about is really a broader issue as well, as far as what representatives and leaders can do. And that is, I'm not going to know everything about every community and every issue. What I think is important is to reach out to communities and individuals for them to inform you. So before I give you my initial thoughts on that, I just want to say that is why I'm doing this, is that I want to be educated. I want to better know from the people themselves who are experiencing these issues, as well as actually talking to the subject matter experts, those who are engaged in the military conflict and engaged in humanitarian efforts and engaged in being on the receiving end. So it's important that we open up that dialogue, because I'm only going to be able to be a better representative if I'm listening to the people who I'm representing. With that said, this is one of the hardest things, particularly for me, because I've been so involved in advocacy regarding human rights in general. And there's a delineation between military aid and humanitarian efforts in aid to countries. And one of the things that I was looking into that I agree with wholeheartedly is that I don't believe you should punish the very people that need aid because of what their government is doing.
Okay.
And so the idea from the aid standpoint, I'm not in favor necessarily using that as a carrot or as a bargaining chip with them, because the people who are being affected by these atrocities are the ones who need us most. And so that would be something that I would look at. But from a military standpoint, and I know that we're going to get into this later, so some of these things kind of overlap, so I'll talk more elaborately, because I think it's in the bigger question next about democracy as a whole is a good place to go. But I'm supportive of things like the Leahy Amendment, where this is Senator Patrick Leahy was the one who sponsored this, where we hold these governments accountable from a military standpoint if they are committing these human rights violations and these atrocities where they don't go unpunished. I'm not a big proponent of a lot of combat in military occupation. I think we're not here to police the world, but it's a balance. It's very difficult. And I think that one thing that I'm a little concerned about right now with our current administration, and it's not just the current one, I think even administrations that I admire and agree with have been going more and more in the direction of acting unilaterally without consulting Congress as far as how we're engaging in the world, and particularly looking at working with our allies. And it seems more and more that we're trying to stand on our own, and that the presidency itself is acting on its own, and that's not really how we're going to do this. And so I know we're going to get into this a little bit more, but I think that we have to balance those things. But I don't believe in denying aid to the very people that are suffering. And I also believe that from a military standpoint, that there are sanctions, there are working with our allies, other things before we have to occupy any place from a military standpoint, and try and encourage, and I even know that you have sometimes in foreign policy, you have to pick the lesser of two evils. You can see this playing out in Syria, where you're trying to support people who don't necessarily see eye to eye on that, but there is a worse evil, and particularly in Africa with I read a lot about particularly with the elections in Kenya over the last year or so, and just with all the murders that are being committed. How do we support the countries and governments, and the aid to the people is important, but what can we be doing? And I think it's something that we need to talk to a lot of people themselves, as well as from those who are on the ground. Like I said, subject matter experts, to understand really what is the best role for us.
Sure.
Okay. And that's a big challenge, I know, for the Kenyan situation. During the election time, the diplomatic community at one point was calling for the President Uhuru Kenyatta to adhere to certain expectations. However, when he won, now they're saying, okay, you're in power, so the opposition will work with him. So it can be a very delicate position. I see where you're coming from.
And I think one of the things I just want to add on there that I've heard, it gets back to voting, which you may not see it, but follow me here, is that, again, where we just said go vote, but when I've talked to a lot of communities, even a lot of the Hispanic communities, they say, okay, a lot of our community have come from governments that are very corrupt, and so they don't trust the system, so they don't want to go vote because they're either intimidated or they don't think it's worthwhile. And I don't think we're doing a really great job right now by proving that it's not corrupt. And that's part of what I'd like to talk about with the next
Okay.
particular question.
Okay.
Is because we have to make sure our own democracy is working before somehow we're the beacons of the world of democracy. But I do think that gets back to for folks who are here that are coming from other countries, that they may not be coming from countries where their vote matters, or they could be killed for it, and we just expect them to suddenly assimilate and be like, yeah, you got to go vote. How can you not vote?
Yeah.
And being able to say, no, your vote actually would work here. We just need a lot more people doing it.
Okay, great. So let's jump to the next question then. America is a beacon of democracy to the world. What will you do to promote democracy, especially in developing countries where dictators are changing their constitutions to suit their ideologies and therefore privileging their own people, left, right, and center?
Sure. Monica, did you have something that you were wanting to?
It's okay. I can come back to it.
Okay.
It's okay. He doesn't pay attention to me.
Wow.
Okay.
This just took a turn.
I'll do better. Okay.
It's okay.
That's all you can say. I'm not going to say anything. All you can say is, I will do better.
Yes.
It's okay. I can come back to it. I had a question, but it's okay. I can come back.
Okay. Well, so one of the things that I love about that question is it makes me think about my experience living overseas and living in a foreign country. And, we were moved there the same way a lot of folks are moved here for a job opportunity. My stepdad worked for Mobil Oil and he got transferred, and so we did. And there was this balance between wanting to be very respectful to the culture and the people that you live in while not necessarily sacrificing your own. While still being able to have your identity and everything. And even at an international school, one of the coolest days of the year was United Nations Day, because everybody would come in their native dress and we'd have native, their native food, and it was just, it was amazing, and we embraced that and we enjoyed that. And I think that, there's a balance of not looking through, and this sounds really highfalutin, but we talked about it when we lived overseas, is looking through an ethnocentric lens in judging what is, human rights violation and what is just a different culture. And, there's a balance there. And I think that we need to be respectful of not imposing our own beliefs and version of democracy on some countries, and making sure that we know truly what it is. But I also think that one of the things that's important is that we need to be an example of our own democracy. And when we have, particularly, especially for women, when in Texas we have one of the highest maternal mortality rates in all developed nations, when we have a chief executive that wants to enforce Muslim bans and build walls, and I think it's really hard to be able to claim some sort of moral superiority in the world when we aren't doing the same in our home. And so I think that's part of it, is trying to perfect our union. That's also part of our founding documents, to be an example there. But I do believe in diplomacy first before there's any sort of military action. But we have to understand that we can't think of ourselves in a bubble, that what happens in other countries does affect us, that we are a global community. And there can be the argument of it being, from an empathetic and compassionate standpoint, that these atrocities that are going on, which are just shocking, I think part of it is educating more Americans on what's going on. Because the American spirit is strong, and when they're educated and they know, they're more inclined to take action. I think that's an important thing to do. But at the same time, if compassion and empathy don't appeal to you, because there are those people, we are safer. We are safer when we are encouraging more democratic systems in other countries. And I think that that's something that we have to work with our allies with, to make sure that that there's still the aid that's going to people to be able to stabilize areas and governments as much as possible to keep us all safer.
It's your turn, Monica.
It's my turn
I
now.
yield
Good move.
to
Good
you.
move.
Okay.
Way to go, Ben.
Okay, so I think my question can fall in anywhere.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
but then I was just thinking as we were talking, Lorie, I always keep on going back to what the president of this beautiful country said about the immigrants.
Which thing that he said?
He says a lot of things. But
Yes.
this one thing really stands out, especially at this time of voting, when he, refers to immigrants as coming from asshole countries, one thing, for a president to actually use words like that, I mean, you're just like, am I still in America again? Okay, hold up,
Right.
So, how do you even convince, immigrants to go out and vote, that their vote is actually still going to count when, somebody in office is using such words to
Yeah.
refer to them?
A couple of ways. One broader sense. So our campaign slogan, as it were,
Yeah.
is "Our moment, our legacy."
Mhm.
And I want you to understand how carefully I came to that, because when we're in a moment like this, where it feels like we're so divided, and maybe that we're going backwards, like you said earlier,
Yeah.
that we need to seize those moments, because the legacy of this country is moments like these where people, however small, rise up and have been able to create amazing change. And so many people in this country have fought and died for the right to vote. Whether it's been the African American community, whether it's been women, whether it's been people who didn't own property. I mean, the voting box is something that is so precious in this country, and it's why so many people in power want to prevent people from exercising that right. So one is just understanding, looking more broadly at the history of this country, that your vote can matter, that organizing and being unified can matter. But I also think it's important to understand that the president is one person, and really the way that this government and our democracy was designed is that the power of the presidency was supposed to be very weak. We came, I mean, the whole reason that America was founded was to get away from a monarchy where one person, one king, had so much power.
Right.
And so what I think people need to galvanize around, and this fits nicely into my race, but
Yes.
galvanize around, is the other people who are running at the federal level for Congress, so for Senate or House of Representatives like myself, because you put more people in there,
Yes.
we need more balance, balance of power. We need more balance of words. We need people who will speak what's called truth to power.
Exactly.
And when you galvanize and unite around these individuals who run and get them in there, then you can restore the balance. And so maybe we have to deal with a chief executive that is very inarticulate. Wasn't that a nice way for me to say that?
I love that.
I was just born for this. But there needs to be more checks and balance. That is what our government is about.
Yeah.
So to take heart in the people that are running at the local level for your city government, who are running for the state level here in Texas, and who are running for the federal level, is to find candidates or run yourself. Run yourself. One of the things I want to see more than anything is to be able to run a successful campaign without big money, without I have a day job. I mean, I don't have a machine or tons of money or resources to plug into. But damn it, those should not be the only people who are representing us. And so I would love to see more everyday people from all walks of life, all communities saying, I'm going to step up and run. And when your government is in the hands of the people, then we can balance that and we can overcome that, and it'll be a better place, a better economy, a more empathetic community. All the good stuff.
Right.
And I believe that, and that's why I'm doing this.
You know what? I feel like, we were just talking about corruption in Africa, but I feel like America already has checks and balances. So when you talk about being held accountable, what else do you need to be held accountable for?
It's the checks and balance is on paper, but it's not being acted out. When you have, but you want to get back to, I know something that you're very passionate about, that a lot of us are, is the fact that we can't get any movement from a legislative standpoint or even have decent conversations around reasonable common sense gun safety. Why is that? It's because there is big money in politics. And that has, and with the Citizens United Supreme Court case that came out a while back, where it opened up the door for these super PACs. So these huge super PACs that tons of money, dark money, meaning it's untraceable, you don't have to report it, is being funneled into campaigns so that the only people that get elected are not, they're beholden to keep getting reelected, which makes them more out of touch with the people, which means they're more out of touch with the issues that affect them. You really think that, you know, someone who has $1 million of their own money to even throw into a campaign really understands what it's like if they run out of Social Security, or Social Security is taken away, or if their child is sick that they have to face bankruptcy in order to pay for their medical care. I mean, these are not things. We don't have people in place now that are truly accountable to the diversity of people that they represent. And so on paper, there's checks and balance, but the system itself is not, it's out of whack. It is not running the way democracy is supposed to be running.
And I needed you to just say that.
Monica has a way of making you say things.
Yes, all right.
That she wants to hear.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Great. Okay. Wonderful. So, no, we really thank you for finding time to be with us, because we know it's a very busy time. Some of our listeners are voters. This is a great time for you to make a case where you're best suited to represent the Collin County Plano District in the U.S. Congress.
Sure.
As we come towards the end of the program.
Well, I appreciate that so much, you all allowing me this platform and this opportunity, and I hope this is just a beginning of a conversation and a dialogue, because I'm doing this because I hear a lot of politicians that say they want to go to Washington to be your voice, and I guess that's part of it, but what I think is more important and more fundamental is I want to provide you your own voice. I want to be listening to people so I can better understand and be a better representative and bring people together to have those tough conversations with each other. And so I appreciate that. If people want to find out more about our race, it's LorieBurchForCongress.com. I encourage you to try and spell it the right way, although we did buy up the URLs, but it's LorieBurch. You can reach out to me. We're very good about getting back to people via email, via phone. I want to hear from people and be that kind of leader who is transparent and who is accountable. As far as making a case for myself, let me just say this, that I'm running for the Democratic primary. So for those voters who want to vote in the Democratic primary, that's where you find my name. Okay. And there are 4 of us who are running. The other 3 candidates are great men. They're very nice, knowledgeable guys. I do feel like there are many things that set me apart. I did get the endorsement from the Dallas Morning News of that race, and that's great honor. But I think what I appreciate the most is their reasoning. One was that I actually am the only one who has real experience in Washington D.C. I've worked there. I've gone to school there. I've worked in those situations. I kind of know what I'm getting into, which really might be a disqualifier, because I should know how crazy this is. But don't see it that way. But the other thing is that I have also led on, not just been a part of, but led national organizations. Particularly, I was the national president of the American Business Women's Association. And so I've been able to listen and bring together people from diverse walks of life, ideologies, beliefs, ages, ethnicities, religions, and been able to unify people, and you're going to like this a lot, but the way we've done it is by treating people with dignity and compassion. And it is amazing the things that you can do when you respect somebody else. And so that's what our campaign is about. That's why I decided to run, is I just want to see good, decent people of character and integrity running. And I've got a future to create for my girls now that I have, I'm a stepmom, and I got married last year, and I want to be able to tell them and to tell my grandchildren that when we faced this moment in our country, that I stood on the right side of history.
Beautiful. Okay, tell us, when the voting day is, what they should do to
So,
vote,
yes.
just because the diaspora community may not be familiar.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So election day is March 6th, so next Tuesday. And for those and elections are going on everywhere, but let me be specific to Collin County. You can go to any of the polling places. I will tell you that there's also different candidates on the ballot for governor, for Senate, for local races. And please reach out to us. And if you want to see people who are on the ballot so that you can feel more informed, then the League of Women Voters is a great resource. There's also, I think it's 411vote.org, but reach out to me and I'll give you that information so you know what your ballot's going to look like.
Right.
There's also about 10, I could be wrong, propositions that are on the ballot, and the Republican ballot is different than the Democratic ballot.
Okay.
And what those propositions are really just forming the platform of the party.
Okay.
And so you vote whether you think that's yes or no. It doesn't put anything into law. It's just helping the parties develop their own platforms. And if you even want to know where do you go, what do you need to bring, what is it like going to a voting machine, please reach out to us. We will talk to you. We will walk you through it. It's Saturday. We've got 3 days left.
Yeah.
I am personally going to be at the polling location from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the Renner Frankfurt polling location.
Okay.
And so, come by if you can go to that area,
Yeah.
then please come and meet
say
me
hi.
in person.
Yeah.
We are going to have some special guests pop in throughout
Okay.
the day.
Wow.
If you're an Elvis fan, then I'm just going to say that
Okay.
that might be something that might be there.
Okay.
So I'm going to say no more. I'm just going to leave you hanging. But we've got to help inform ourselves and our communities and make it easier and simpler to go vote, like it's going and buying a car. Although that's really difficult. So let me make a different analogy. Going and buying a scoop of ice cream.
Great. We wish you the best of luck from Echo FM.
All right. Okay. This has been a special edition with Lorie Burch on Echo FM, State of the Nation. For this and more of our programmings, go to www.echofm.com. Until next time, it's goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.